Come to this place, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of learning, all seekers after what is true, all who seek a community of compassion and diversity. Come to this place, whoever you are, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, and you're too busy, and you don't have the time. Come to this place, whoever you are, lovers of wisdom, lovers of humanity, lovers of beauty. Come to this place where a love we do not make surrounds us and lifts us and nurtures us. Come to this place, whoever you are. Ours is not a community of despair, but of hope. Not a place of judging, but of thanksgiving. Not a place of certainty, but of searching. Come to this place, whoever you are. Come yet again. Come. The twilight. Our 3.5-year-old tried to gain his parents' attention to a shining star. The parents were busy with time and schedules, the irritabilities of the day, and other worthy preoccupations. Yes, we see the star. Now I'm busy, don't bother me. On hearing this, the young one launched through the porch door, fixed us with his fiery gaze, and said, "You be glad at that star." I will not forget the incident or his perfect words, writes Wells. It was one of those rare moments when you get everything you need for the good of your soul. Reprimand, disclosure, and blessing. It was especially good for me, that surprising moment, because I am one who responds automatically and negatively to the usual exhortations to pause and be more appreciative of life, unquote. Fortunately, I was caught grandly off guard. There is a notion with some truth to it that we cannot command joy, happiness, appreciation, fulfillment. We do not engineer the seasons of the soul or enjoin the quality of mood in another. And yet, I do believe there is right and wisdom in that imperative declaration, "You be glad at that star." If we cannot impel ourselves into stellar gladness, we can at least clean the dust from the lens of our perception. If we cannot dictate our own fulfillment, we can at least steer in the right direction. If we cannot exact a guarantee for a more appreciative awareness of our world, for persons and stars and breathing and tastes, and the incalculable gift of every day, we can at least prescribe some of the conditions through which an increased awareness is more likely to open up the skies for us and for our children. It is not always the great evils that obstruct and waylay our joy. It is our unnecessary and undignified surrender to the petty enemies. And I suggest it is our duty to scheme against them, time and schedules, our irritabilities of the day, and other preoccupations. Matters more subtle and humane should command our lives. You be glad at that star. I have been obsessed with watching the Summer Olympics. There are some sports that I've come upon that I didn't even know existed as Olympic competition. Handball, speed walking, dressage. What on earth? Of course, I also have some longtime favorites, gymnastics, swimming, and diving among them. I commend President Obama for his phone call to the women's gymnastics team after their big win. I believe his words were, "How do you do that?" which echoed my own thoughts closely. The Olympics never cease to amaze me. And one thing that amazed me this month was this. Picture two U.S. Olympic swimmers, both dripping wet after finishing a final, both having just won medals. The first one says, "It's not my normal specialty. We went out there and raced tough and just came up a little short." The second has a beaming face. He says, "I swam my own race. I knew I had a lane and an opportunity, and I went for it. It worked out, you know. It's just awesome that I get to go on the podium tonight. Honestly, I'm really proud of myself." The disappointed athlete is Ryan Lochte, seconds after the 4x100-meter freestyle relay at the London 2012 Olympics. The guy who was thrilled, Brendan Hansen, just seconds after the 100-meter men's breaststroke finals. Here's the funny part. The medal Lochte was disappointed to have won, silver. The medal Hansen was thrilled to have won, bronze. While Lochte dwelled in disappointment at his second-place medal, Hansen took great joy in his third, saying, "This is the shiniest bronze medal you will ever see, ever." For decades, psychologists have noted an irony in elite athletic competition. If you set aside the really happy people who win gold and look only at the people who come in second and third, it's the men and women with bronze medals who seem to look happier. It's true. Researchers even published a paper about this after the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, during which they studied photographs of athletes on the victory podium and post-competition interviews. Bronze medal winners were happier than silver medalists. The psychologists surmised that the happiness of Olympians has a lot to do with who they are comparing themselves to. Silver medal winners compare themselves to gold medalists and feel they came up short. Bronze medal winners seem to unconsciously compare themselves to everyone else who didn't win a medal, and they feel lucky. Happiness, it seems, is relative. So who are we comparing ourselves to? Are we locating ourselves as residents of a wealthy, well-developed country with access to food, water, and health care and feeling lucky? Or are we continually trying to keep up with the Joneses and feeling like those silver medalists that our lives are coming up short? I am just going to assume that this is something that we all struggle with, because I know that I do. And each of us are called to realign our own perspectives in whatever way works for us, so that we can feel blessed by that gorgeous rainbow of a sunset in front of us, instead of pining away for the giant beach house behind us. If we cannot impel ourselves into a stellar gladness, we can at least clean the dust from the lens of our perception. If we cannot dictate our own fulfillment, we can at least steer in the right direction. If we cannot exact a guarantee for a more appreciative awareness of our world, for persons and stars and breathing and taste and the incalculable gift of every day, we can at least prescribe some of the conditions through which an increased awareness is more likely to open up the skies for us and for our children. In the end, I would rather be looking out every Sunday at a sea of happy bronze medal winners who are conscious of their blessings than at a room of heartsick silver medalists, still focused on what they could have done differently to win gold. So maybe we do not stumble upon happiness as the title of this morning's sermon suggests. Maybe we work at it. Daniel Gilbert, a social psychologist from Harvard University, has made something of a study of happiness. It is the subject of his book, Stumbling on Happiness. That's where I stole the title from. And also the PBS documentary which he hosts, This Emotional Life. In the documentary, Gilbert connects with psychologists, neuroscientists, economists, and others, all using the scientific method to study happiness. To judge someone's happiness, he studies brain waves, hormones, surveys, and even asks their friends. One of Gilbert's interviews has stayed with me. It was of Bob Shoemaker, a U.S. veteran who served as a Navy pilot in Vietnam. In 1965, Bob was a young husband with a newborn baby, and he was serving on a mission just north of the demilitarized zone that separates North Vietnam and South Vietnam. When his plane was shot down, flipping upside down, he ejected. Bob's parachute did not open until he was just 35 feet above the ground. His back broke on impact. He was captured and spent the next 8 years as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, enduring the cruelest physical torture you can think of. Their techniques, he said, would get you to condemn your own grandmother if you had to. And worse than the physical torture was the psychological. For almost 3 years, Bob was held in solitary confinement. There were 11 other prisoners kept in adjacent cells, each with a solitary light bulb hanging from the ceiling, which was kept burning 24 hours a day. There were no windows. To deal with his isolation, Bob spent hours, days, years even, imagining the house he would build for his young family, should he ever survive. I would spend 10 to 12 hours thinking about how many bricks were needed, he said. Bob spent a year and a half designing the exact floor plan of his dream home, and then one day he moved the fireplace and started all over again. Talk about working at happiness. Although they were isolated from one another, Bob and the other prisoners developed an ingenious method of communication which they called the tap code. The alphabet was arranged in a square with 5 rows and 5 columns, and they would do a series of taps to designate the letters, eventually spelling out words and phrases. They came up with shorthand, transmitting messages and lessons through the wall. How to fix a television, words to songs, even French and biology lessons. A common message, GBU, meant God bless you. We spent a lot of time on the wall, said Bob. It was what kept their hope alive. When he was released on February 12, 1973, the first thing Bob did was call his wife. Hearing the words, "Hi, honey," on the phone erased 8 painful years. Bob went on to become a rear admiral, a college professor, and continued to be a loving husband and father. He built that house he had dreamed of all those years in captivity, and it is full of windows. Dr. Dennis Charney met Bob as part of an extensive study he was doing on resilience. He had interviewed hundreds of people, including those who have survived natural disasters, prisoners of war, and firemen responding to 9/11. Most amazingly, when he asked Bob if he would have eliminated the POW experience from his life if given the chance, Bob, like almost all of the other POWs said no. He had learned things about himself through that experience that had helped him for the rest of his life. Inside almost all of us, Charney says, is the capacity to overcome the most horrific stresses in our lives. And what is more, we can learn from that stress and grow and thrive as a person. When my sister, Sarah, was going through throat cancer several years ago, our family took turns watching my niece and nephew while she was receiving treatment. My day was Tuesdays. I remember Sarah coming home from the hospital one day with a poster for the refrigerator, which was meant to help her young children process their emotions around dealing with her illness. The poster had rows and rows of cartoon faces on it, representing every kind of emotion. We invited my nephew John, who was 5 at the time, to come and show us how he was feeling. He picked each face carefully. "I'm a little bit sad," he said, "and a little bit scared, and a little bit angry." As we were taking this in, Callie, then just 2 years old, crawled over to the refrigerator, took her pacifier out of her mouth, and pointed to the faces one by one. "Happy, happy, 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 happy," she said, for each of them. Her optimism provided my sister and I with a much-needed laugh. During Sarah's illness, there were definitely days when each of us wondered, would we ever be happy again? And then one day, probably different days for each of us, we were. Sarah's kids are 5 and 8 now. They are happy kids who remember little about their mother's cancer. I think of my sister as the most resilient person in the world, but I know that she is not alone. Resilience, says Charney, isn't rare. In fact, it's very common. One thing all those resilient people have in common, though, is social support. Everyone needs a tap code. You can't do it alone. You need other people. While comparing ourselves to other people may make us miserable, it is our connection to others which predicts our happiness in other ways too. Friends and family, partners and coworkers, church people on Sundays, and the person who pours us coffee on Monday morning, they are all wound up in our happiness. Daniel Gilbert has devoted his life to the study of happiness, and his conclusion is this: the secret of happiness was never very secret. We're connected to each other. We belong to each other. We're made for each other. Life is a journey through time, and happiness is what happens when we make that journey together. Sometimes it just takes a young companion on our journey to remind us, happy, 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 happy. You be glad at that star. Amen, and blessed be.